I think and I hope that Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister of England is going to be a really positive step forward in what I like to call the Great Realignment. I don't like using the word populism, populist uprising, that sort of stuff, because it just has all these kind of ill-defined, icky connotations right now. But by the Great Realignment, what I mean is that we're increasingly living in an era where the opinion of the sort of elite gatekeepers, you've got the media, you've got academics, those sorts of individuals, the people in the government institutions, their views are increasingly at odds with the overwhelming vast majority of the people. Now, Boris Johnson, he's an interesting individual because he's been compared to Donald Trump in sort of style and manner, and I think it's a fair point in terms of just his sort of braggadocio and so forth, but he's cut from very different cloth. I mean, we talk about Donald Trump as a populist figure, Doug Ford somewhat sitting in that sort of broader realm. Boris Johnson, a little different though. He actually comes from the upper crust. He's a bit of an intellectual himself, an elite figure. He worked for The Spectator, which was a right-wing publication. He was the editor of The Spectator, but it's also a more sort of highbrow publication. He has art historians in his family. I mean, this is a guy who it's going to be a bit more difficult for the elites to sneer at. It's going to be a bit more difficult for them to just dismiss the sort of great realignment views he has. For instance, his pro-Brexit views, which he is very, very in favor of. I mean, part of the challenge with Theresa May's leadership is she was tasked with implementing Brexit, but she wasn't one of the leading Brexiteers, so it was always an odd fit, always a very bizarre fit to have her leading the charge in all of that. And quite frankly, we're long overdue for something of I don't want to say a more highbrow populist, because it really doesn't matter what one's background is or what one's resume is and class and all that kind of stuff, but someone who is going to really articulate these sort of issues in an incredibly precise way. Because one of the frustrations about someone like Donald Trump is he issues these tweets and these statements, and then they're kind of vague. So you have a lot of people saying, oh, he means this horrible thing, this is the worst thing since sliced bread, and then his defenders say, well, no, what he actually means is this, that, and the other, and you get into these fact wars because Donald Trump leaves things rather ambiguously, and he could certainly benefit from being a more precise speaker and a more precise tweeter. Well, Boris Johnson, he doesn't have that problem. He's a very articulate individual. And that's what advocates for populism or the Great Realignment, sort of getting things cleaned up in sort of the views of what the regular people feel in a democracy and how the gatekeepers, the elites, the managerial class, how they should be responding to those issues. That's what you need. You need a great communicator in all of that. Great communicator, that's what they called Ronald Reagan. We haven't had someone since Reagan, really, who was able to take the sort of the inchoate feelings of a lot of regular people and sum them up articulately in relatively brief sentences and paragraphs. Hopefully, that's what Boris Johnson will do. Obviously, there's been people who have failed to deliver on issues like this before. Maybe Boris Johnson will end up being one of them. But maybe he will succeed, and he can be something of a role model for other people who also want to see something of a great realignment move forward in their part of the world, in their country, maybe even here in Canada.